This is my reflection for my first video for task 5, for 5B, and I'm just going to go over the summary that I filled out for my scores for each element that was in the lesson. So the first one was providing scales and rubrics. I gave myself a 3 for that. I use the scale every day. I show the students a scale, and we talk about what skills they need to know in each level, what the unit scale is, and how what we're doing that day ties to that. Their students are shown in the video explaining how they use it and how they can find where they are at on it. So I feel like the students are showing the evidence of it as well. So that's why I gave myself a 3. Then number 4, informal assessments, I gave myself a 2.5. I use a lot of informal assessments. I feel like I'm doing all of the teacher behaviors on there. We use whiteboards every day, thumbs up, thumbs down. The students are engaged while they do it. The reason I gave myself a 2.5 is when we interviewed the students, or when a colleague interviewed the students, they really couldn't tell me like the difference between individual assessments versus the whole class assessments and kind of why I do it. And so they're doing the things, they just don't necessarily maybe see that correlation between them. Chunking content, I gave myself a 4. I feel this is something I typically do really well, breaking things up for math specifically, so that it's in small pieces for the students. The video that I recorded was we were in the beginning of the unit on adding, subtracting fractions and mixed numbers, and so that day we only worked with mixed numbers with like denominators, and they just had to work on the regrouping and the ungrouping, and that was kind of the new skill for the day. But even that was broken up into pieces. I use daily math to kind of get an idea of where they're at. It's what they do when they come in the classroom each day, kind of like bell work or a checkpoint. I try to make it pretty obvious when I'm showing a new piece, like I had them put their pencil in their book so that they are kind of seeing that next step and getting out of their books, because otherwise they tend to keep going with what they're doing and don't really pay attention to that next step. I have them talk with their table groups as we learn a new thing. They'll do a few problems and then share with their group so that they can kind of look at what they've learned and process what they've learned. The student that was interviewed was able to like explain that I chunk things, that I teach things in smaller pieces so that she knows she can follow along, or they can follow along. And I also feel that with the chunking, the reason I went to a 4 for this one is if I have planned to teach a certain amount or to break it in a different spot, but I can tell that the students either aren't getting it the way I thought they would, or they already have it or are getting it way quicker than I thought they would, I adjust how much I'm going to teach or how much I break it apart for them. Number 7, processing content. I gave myself a 2.5. I have them process with their elbow partner table group a lot. They'll do, ask a question, and then they show their table group. They talk about what they got, things like that. The students are usually engaged during that. I feel like when I walk around, I hear them having a conversation about the math that we're doing. And I feel like most of them are showing the behaviors, or a lot of the behaviors, but not necessarily all of them. They can't always explain why they're doing what they're doing or why I have them work with a partner. Number 9, structured practice sessions. I gave myself a 4. I also feel this is something that is a strength of mine. We practice as a whole group. While we're working, they then do some work in their own table groups, but I spend a lot of time with small group as well. In the student interview, you probably heard a couple students refer to that, where if I notice students aren't understanding the skill, I'll pull them, or I always give them the opportunity during work time that I'm always at the table available for more practice and for help with things. And those groups are fluid. They change based on the day and the skill and what we're doing and who needs the help. And so I feel like that is one of my areas of strength. Element 11, finding errors in reasoning. I scored myself a 2.5. I do show common mistakes to the students, or I try to. I talk about kind of the things that typical fifth graders will do, common misconceptions, and try and help them work through it. I showed a few in that lesson specifically. Oftentimes when a student makes a mistake, I will have them look at their work to try and find their own mistake versus me telling them what they did wrong. Of course, if they can't figure it out, then I help them that way, but I usually want them to see if they can go back and find where they made the mistake. And then 2.5 was because I, again, saw some of the behaviors of the students, but not necessarily all of them. I don't necessarily know if students will be able to tell me how finding a mistake helps their understanding. I sometimes think that students get frustrated when I ask them to find their mistake, or when we talk about what someone did incorrectly, because they just want to be right. So I don't know if they really make the connection yet between why it's sometimes good to make a mistake, because then you can figure out what you did wrong and learn from it. But element 15, previewing strategies. I gave myself a score of 3. I always start the lesson with telling the students what we're going to be learning, and go over the goals for the day. We go over the scale. On the welcome screen when they come in, it always tells them what the main topic for the day is, or what skill they're going to be working on, so they know that. I always try and make connections between old and new strategies. So the day of the video, that lesson that I was doing, I was connecting to the previous unit that we had done, showing that all those skills we've been working on was building into what we were going to be doing in this unit. And students are making that connection between the new material and the previous material as well. Highlighting critical info. I gave myself a 3 on that. I tried to really point out if something's really important. I said it multiple times that day that it was important, and so they needed to pay attention at that point. I really try to redirect focus when it is a critical piece that they need. And in the video, students were able to say how I make sure that they know it's important by my tone of voice and by saying different things. Element 17, reviewing content. I gave myself a 2.5. We review, as you saw in the video, we do start out with review every day, doing some problems. I also the daily math that we do is always review problems for the most part. So from the prior day, the prior week, sometimes even all the way back to the beginning of the year, just to get that spiral review. So we're constantly reviewing. In the practice groups that I was talking about, sometimes it's review for that. And then the 2.5 is just I'm not really sure of what the students really think, if they're kind of rethinking what they have learned, or make that connection. Element 20, assigning purposeful homework. I gave myself a 3. I feel like I exhibit all of the evidence and understandings for homework. I'm purposeful with the homework I assign, making sure that it's not too many problems. It's focused on what I really need them to know, and I feel like the students were able to articulate that in the interview, that I don't always just say do all the problems. I give them specific ones that they're doing, and on that particular day there was an example of that. We just did odds and then just a couple on the back. Element 22, organizing students to interact. I gave myself a score of a 4. This is also something I really feel is a strength of mine. I'm very intentional with groupings. For my math classes, they have a different seating arrangement for math. I put them in their groupings. They're in groups of 3 or 4, and so I try to have some mixed abilities in there, so that the struggling learners can learn from the higher students, and the higher students have the opportunity to kind of do some teaching within that group. And then there's usually, a couple middle level to balance it out as well. So a range of students so that they're learning from each other and working together. I have them do a lot of work in elbow partners, and that is one of the reasons I'm so specific about my groups, is because of their elbow partner work. They usually work well together and do what they're supposed to, so I feel like how I organize them works well. I do use other methods as well. If we're doing other activities, I'm just very intentional about how I group them. And I always will adjust that if I need to. So if I see that a group isn't working, we'll make changes, and the students are able to kind of articulate how I put them in groups by saying, like, I draw sticks, or they work in table groups or things like that. They said that in the interviews. So I feel like that was my area of strength. The element 23, noticing and reacting when students are not engaged. I gave myself a 2.5 for that. I feel like I walk around and, I can see if they're engaged. I try to re-engage them by verbal and nonverbal cues. I gave myself a 2.5 because I don't think the students would be able to verbalize like why I expect high engagement levels or what that does for the class. Element 24, increasing response rates. This was my growth goal. And like I had stated, I feel like I tend to call on the same students who raise their hands because I try not to just call on students who don't have their hands up. I know that can be a really high stressor for some students who don't like talking in front of class, or the ones who don't feel confident in math. But I do know that it's important to have everyone involved. So I'm working on that. In the lesson, I used, every day I use whiteboards so I can see what each individual student is doing. But I still would like to have more students just involved in actually answering the questions when I ask. And so I used thumbs up and thumbs down to get a little bit different engagement. And then I drew sticks to have them come up to the board and write their answer. And if they did have the option, I used the phone a friend. So if they just really are not comfortable coming up and doing that or answering the question, they can call on a friend to help them out so that they aren't put on the spot and get that stress level up. So I do still think I have some room for growth in this area, and it's something that I kind of always am working on. I feel like, because I want students involved in answering questions and participating, but I also don't want students to feel like they're attacked or being put on the spot or just uncomfortable, because I know that can be really hard for some students. So I think I improved on it in that lesson from kind of where I have been, but I definitely still know I could use some strategies to increase that. Then element 24, or element 25, I'm sorry, is using physical movement. So in this lesson, I really noticed when I was watching the video that the students sat for a really long time. I gave myself a 1.5. They get a natural break when they go to music. So we have math for like a half hour, then they go to music, and then they come back and we finish math. So I kind of always feel like they get that break and it is enough. But when I was watching the video and kind of saw the students losing focus and just kind of not always being engaged, I realized that I probably need to improve on that. So I thought that something I could do, like how I had them show someone at their table group, occasionally I could have them take their whiteboard and get up and go find someone at another table group and show them their answer and talk about what they did, just to get them out of their seats once in a while. Because just watching it, I realized that some of them were very antsy and looked like they needed some movement. So something I definitely can work on. Element 26, maintaining a lively pace. I gave myself a 2.5. I try to keep the pace moving and gauge the students' understanding. Like I had said, kind of with the chunking, if I notice that they're getting it, I move a little quicker. If I notice that they're not, I slow down. Try and keep it moving, and we only have a certain amount of time to cover a lot of stuff, so just trying to get through it, but also not overwhelm them. I feel like for the most part it works pretty well. I do sometimes struggle with some of the higher kids that are done quickly and they're probably bored, and then I'm still working with some of the kids who struggle, and so I try and just keep moving with the slides and let the, I work with ones that are struggling, and then the rest of them can do the next problem or however it is. But I try to make it so that they're all staying engaged in working, but sometimes it's a little trickier than others. And then as far as the 2.5, I don't know for the student understandings or what they would say, if they would say about the pace or not. Element 27, demonstrating intensity and enthusiasm, 2.5 there as well, and kind of the same along the lively pace. Like I try to keep it interesting and keep them engaged. Sometimes it seems more challenging than others. The day that the video was, it was like 100 degrees in our room, so that didn't help. It was a really hot day, and none of them were very enthused, so it was just harder than I anticipated, I guess. But and if I ask the students, I don't know if they would say that it's lively and enthusiastic, so that's why I did the 2.5. Establishing rules and procedures, element 33. This was a strength of mine. I felt like I gave myself a 4. I always have a very structured classroom. Classroom management has always been one of my stronger areas. The students know what the expectations are. They come in the room, they get started. From the student interviews, the students were very easily able to tell my colleague what the procedures are, what they're supposed to do, and what I expect when they are in the room. So I feel that that was a 4, and I adapt as needed, and I reinforce the rules as needed, and I use the same procedures as often as possible so that it's very routine for them. And element 34 kind of goes along with that, organizing physical layout of the classroom. Again, I'm a pretty organized person. It's a strength of mine as well. I make sure that the seating, I pay attention to the groupings, and then the desks are organized so that they work well in groups. All of the materials are where they can find it. And again, the student interviews kind of said that as well. And make adjustments as needed if things aren't in a convenient place, or if it's not working where I put it that year. I'll move things so that it works for that group and what we need. And so that's usually, like I said, a strength of mine. Element 35, demonstrate with itness. I gave myself a 4 for that as well. I'm pretty proactive as far as trying to anticipate what might go wrong with a lesson, and going ahead to make sure that it's all covered. When the students were, not doing what they were supposed to be doing, I was pretty easily able to get them back on track. Even stopping the lesson to do that, recognizing that they weren't on task, and getting them back. And in the student interviews, they acknowledged some of that as well. Element 36, acknowledging adherence to rules and procedures. I gave myself a 3. I used verbal and nonverbal acknowledgments to let students know that they were following the rules. In the video, I said something along the lines, thank you to those who have come in and got started, and I usually use some sort of line like that. One of the students had said that in the interview as well, that I say something about thank you to my friends who are following directions, and that. Element 37, applying consequences for lack of adherence to rules and procedures. Gave myself a 4 for that, and I feel like this is another strength of mine. I used verbal and nonverbal cues. I stopped the lesson when students weren't listening to get them back when another student was talking. I move around the room and redirect for students who are off task, reminding them of what is expected and to have them doing what they're supposed to be doing. And the student interviews said the same thing, and I make adjustments to that pretty quickly in general. And that day, especially, like I said, I think the engagement was a little low that day, and so I was working a little bit harder to kind of keep them on task and keep them what they needed to be doing. And then element 40, displaying objectivity and control, I gave myself a 2.5. I feel like for the lesson I was calm and in control, which is, I feel, pretty typical. I was assertive when needed, and I felt like the students appeared calm and settled most of the time. I just don't know if they would agree and say that the room is calm and in control. So I haven't asked them that, and I'm not sure what they would say. As I kind of mentioned already, I felt like an area of strength for me was all of design area 8. That's just something that I feel kind of has come natural to me, and in that lesson and pretty much most lessons, I feel like the students come in, they know what's expected, they know what I want them to be doing, and what will happen if they aren't following directions. And so that whole area, I feel like, went well that day and generally does for me. And then the area of improvement, like I had mentioned, for getting some movement in, picking up some of the engagement. I do think that the engagement was kind of low that day in general. I don't know if it was because it was a Monday or it was hot in the room or what, but it was a little low, and maybe some movement would have helped that. So just kind of recognizing maybe when the students need a different break or need something else for that.